Wow. I don't know what to say about this game other than the fact that this might be the best soccer game I have ever watched in my life. And that's not even in an exaggeration whatsoever because this game had pretty much everything. And then some in terms of what you expect a crazy soccer match would have. But in the end, it's the US getting a 3-2 win against Mexico. And, I also talked about how this is probably the greatest soccer game I ever watched in my life. But I think you could definitely say that this is probably the greatest USA versus Mexico game ever. And that's even better than what happened in 2015 when both of these teams play in the CONCACAF Cup. And I was actually at that game down in the Rose Bowl where, the score was also 3-2, but Mexico, of course, win that one. And that's even more than the famous 2-0 back in the 2001 World Cup qualifying, also in the 2002 World Cup round of 16. But this game, it just had emotion flying from the start of this game all the way to the 130th minute of this one. So before we kind of tackle in terms of this crazy game, let us actually talk about the starting 11, and there's actually 3 changes for the U.S. in the starting 11 as Robinson, Jackson Yo, and Leggett come out of the starting 11, and Reem, Yetlin, and Acosta basically replaced him. Leggett did came on as a sub later in this game, but Robinson and Jackson Yo was not in the starting 11, although I think they were on the bench in this game, but they were part of an unused sub in this crazy game that I'm about to talk about. So in the first half, and as I said, this game, it basically kicked off from minute 1 because in the first minute, Mexico would get the opening goal of this game. It's Tito Corona that scores to give Mexico a 1-0 lead, and this was just a WTF turnover from McKenzie. And, coming into this game, my main concern about the U.S. coming into this against Mexico is inexperience going to be a problem for them, because when you look at this U.S. side and compare it to this Mexican side that has a lot of experienced players, and that this U.S. side still have this squad that is relatively new, and that I did kind of mention in the last game, it's going to take time in terms of how this squad, of course, with Joe, and even after this game, I still think there's still a lot to work on in terms of trying to get this group gel and get them ready to be at its peak when the World Cup qualifying has happened. But early on, it definitely looked like that inexperience basically killed him early, because McKenzie, this is probably the biggest game that he has ever played in his life, and you can definitely tell that he definitely had a lot of nerves, and even pretty much all these U.S. players had nerves there. And this was just an uncharacteristic mistake that McKenzie made in this game. And also, overall, I didn't think McKenzie had a good game in this one. And later on, as we will talk about, maybe about 30 minutes, we're going to talk about a penalty that he, of course, conceded late in the game that almost caused the U.S. to go to a penalty shootout against Mexico. But in the 4th minute, Ochoa denied Sargent, who was through on goal. And I thought it was a lively start to the Nations League Final. Well, that lively start there that I wrote in the fifth minute, little did I know that it would turns out to be just an instant classic between the U.S. versus Mexico. But there's also one thing I want to add in terms of talk about this is I'm kind of a little bit surprised that it was a lively start, because when you usually see finals, you usually see things kind of be a little bit cagey, and I was maybe hoping that the U.S. don't really want to get into kind of a end-to-end battle with Mexico early in the game, knowing the fact that this U.S. is still a relatively inexperienced side, and there's a lot of nerves that is going on with this U.S. player, and the only thing they really need to do in these opening bit is just kind of calm things down and trying to get the butterfly feeling out of their stomach, but instead of just going with this end-to-end action with Mexico, because if they decide to do that, then that's when I feel like they're going to make mistake at the back, and we kind of saw that in the first minute of this game. And of course, I also wrote inexperience of the U.S. players started to show, and it seems like everyone looked nervous. That's kind of just basically so they prove what I said earlier, where it just feels like a lot of these U.S. players look very, very nervous, and that they just feel like the butterfly stomach is still in them, and that it was kind of good that eventually they kind of swallowed that feeling and started to play a little bit better heading into the rest of this game. I also wrote, they mentioned Mexico have won 28 out of 34 against the U.S. when scoring first. Well, after tonight, it's going to be 28 out of 35 that Mexico, of course, won against the U.S., but it basically shows that Mexico has a very good record when they, of course, scored the first goal against the U.S. And I also thought that, heading into this game, if Mexico does get that first goal, I feel like the U.S. is going to be in trouble because, again, this inexperienced squad, with the way that I still don't know whether or not if they, of course, can show the resiliency to come back from a deficit. Oh, yeah, by the end of this game, I think that answer pretty much the question of do this squad, when they do face some adversity during a game and maybe go down early in the game, can they, of course, quickly respond? Now, in the 23rd minute, it looked like Mexico was going to be up 2-0, and it looked like this was going to turn to be very ugly for the U.S., but they go to VAR to check to see whether or not if Hector Moreno was in an offside position. By the way, this is the first time CONCACAF have decided to use VAR in terms of a final tournament. Obviously, they have been using VAR in the CONCACAF Champions League, but this is actually the first time they, of course, use it in a final in any of the CONCACAF tournament. And on the replay, they saw that Moreno was just in an offside position, and it was really close because I kind of feel like maybe Reams, his right leg, kind of kept Moreno onside there, but the referee felt like that wasn't the case, and it looks like Moreno was just a touch offside, and therefore the goal was disallowed, and the game remained 1-0 in favor of Mexico. And that turns out to be very important because just 2 minutes later, Gio Reyna would tie the game up for the U.S., and originally McKennie basically hit the post from a corner that was delivered in, but fortunately, when McKennie basically hits that one off the post, it bounced kindly to Reyna, who just easily tapped it into the empty net. Probably one of the easiest goals that he will ever score in his life to tie the game up at 1 apiece. I also thought tonight the U.S. did a very good job on the set piece, which is something that was a problem in the last game against Honduras. I thought in the last game they were very wasteful in terms of their set piece opportunity, but this game they were not only much better in terms of taking their set piece, but they really troubled Mexico in terms of those set piece opportunity that they had in this game. Now, this game has already started to become end-to-end and very even, as both teams were showing some urgency whenever they go on the attack as soon as they won the ball. But I also thought that there was just still way too many turnover from the U.S. in the midfield. Like, again, just every time they kind of turned the ball over in the midfield, my heart kind of sank a little bit because I know that Mexico can immediately just go on the counter-attack and threaten the U.S. I thought Mexico, one of the things that they did very well in this game against the U.S. defense was, play quickly on the transition, but also those over-the-top ball, which, at time I know Mexico did a good job in terms of those over-the-top ball and trying to play directly, but there was a couple of times where if they would have got that over-the-top ball right, they would have been in on goal because the U.S. was having a lot of trouble in terms of dealing that. As the half kind of come to a close, I thought Mexico kind of took control of the possession, and the U.S. was kind of pinning back, and it almost felt like they were kind of playing a little bit conservative and trying to head to halftime with the score being tied at 1 apiece. And in the 43rd minute, Zach Steffen absolutely robbed Chucky Lozano there, who he was one-on-one with the goalkeeper, but Steffen was able to deny him in there. This was kind of similar to what happened in the last game against Honduras, where Steffen also had a big save to deny one of the Honduras player, who I think he was also called Lozano, that was going for on goal, but Steffen was able to come up with the big save. And here it seems like Steffen did it again. This time did it against the Mexican Chucky Lozano there. And usually when Chucky Lozano go one-on-one like that, you definitely wouldn't bet against the fact that he's not going to put that one away. So that was definitely a big save from Zach Steffen. And also I thought both goalkeeper in this game was very impressive and came up with some big save, but none other than the one that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this review. Herrera then hits it wide after completely getting left unmarked in the box in the 44th minute. So I talked about how Mexico was struggling in terms of dealing with set piece. I thought the U.S. at time did struggle in terms of dealing with set piece too, and there was a couple of times that they just let some Mexican player wide open in the box, but fortunately Up until that point, they weren't really being punished because of that. So we had to halftime at one apiece between both of these teams, and I hope when you get a chance to basically the at halftime and also the intermission between the second half and the first half of extra time, and also the intermission between the first half of extra time and the second half of extra time, you were of course able to kind of take a break and kind of relax a little bit, because get ready for what is even going to be more crazy things that's going to happen in this game. So in the second half, in the 48th minute, we had some little coming together between both of these teams, because this is Mexico versus USA. You're going to have coming together. Although I thought at least at that part of the game, there wasn't as much as coming together that I thought it in. I mean, later in the game, things definitely got really intense, but that was kind of the beginning where the temperature was started to rise up, and the tempers were definitely started to be short in terms of both of these teams, as they were really trying to go at each other. Mexico, I thought they started to press high again, but the U.S. did a little bit better than what they did in the first half. Oh, I forgot to mention the U.S. in the first half, they were literally playing into the Mexico press. Like, I thought Mexico early, they was trying to high press the U.S., and I thought in the first half the U.S. did a terrible job in terms of dealing with the press. Like, every time they try to play out of the back, they literally just play into the Mexico press. But in the second half, I feel like they did a much better job in terms of trying to play out of the Mexico press, and Mexico wasn't really having as good of a success in the press as they had in the first half. Then in the 55th minute, Charlie Rodriguez tried to curl one to the top bin, but missed wide before Serginho Dest hits it on the volley and missed wide just 2 minutes later. Then in the 61st minute, Ochoa was able to deny McKennie on, and then on the follow-up, Josh Sargent kind of was a little bit off balance, but he couldn't quite put that one away from an off-balance shot. And then in the 66th minute, Zach Steffen basically was subbed off of what looked like was a hamstring injury, and Ethan Horvath, of course, was coming into this game. And, originally when I saw how Steffen kind of went down the ground, I thought he was just kind of practicing the dark arts, and that this was kind of him just kind of waste a little bit of time, maybe slow the momentum that Mexico was having up to that point. But then the longer that he was staying down, and the fact that, they were kind of trying to stretch him out, maybe thinking that he actually had a cramp. And originally Steffen did try to keep going, but he just basically immediately went back down on the ground, and you knew when that is the case, it's probably not a cramp, but more it's probably a hamstring injury. And keep in mind, he actually also didn't had any contact with any of the Mexican player when he was come off his lines to gather that ball. So when that happens, and whenever there's kind of like a non-contact injury, it is going to be almost impossible to try to keep going. And yeah, at that point, I thought that was a serious blow for the U.S. because, Zach Steffen, I thought up to that point he was very good, and now you bring in Ethan Horvath, who, it's always going to be tough to try to bring a player that haven't played a lot of games and bring him in such an intense game like this, but to just bring a goalkeeper that has rarely been playing with the U.S. men's national team, and playing these kind of high intense matchup, I thought the U.S. was going to be screwed going forward. And I also kind of thought that despite the fact that Horvath was coming into there, I was kind of surprised that Mexico didn't immediately try to kind of test him. I think they kind of mentioned in the broadcast, Mauricio do kind of mention it, that I won't be surprised if Mexico decided to test him immediately to see if he's actually good or not. And I kind of agree with him there, because I feel like Mexico should have maybe took a little more of those long range effort to see whether or not if Ethan Horvath can actually stand up in this big of a moment. But as I said, later on, that pretty much answered the question of whether or not if he can actually stand up in this big moment of a game. Now, in the 70th minute, Ochoa absolutely robbed McKennie there on the header, and McKennie basically put plenty of power and good placement into this header, and I also mentioned the fact that this one was coming from the corner, which McKennie was able to get some good power into it, but Ochoa literally at full stretch basically denied him there from the start. The U.S. was definitely pressing to try to get the go-ahead goal, but then in the 79th minute, Mexico would retake the lead, and it's Diego Lainez that scored from Lozano, and that was not good defending from the U.S., and especially on Tim Ream's part, where, another thing that I was also kind of surprised with Mexico in this game is I'm surprised they decided to not try to go more toward the right flank, where Tim Reams is basically Tim Reams is playing there, because I thought Tim Reams at times in this game was a liability for this U.S. defense, and Mexico just kind of keep playing on the other side, not playing the side that Tim Reams are supposed to cover, and that I think this was really one of the first time they decided to do so, and you can instantly see Tim Reams was getting exposed because of that. And again, Mexico, of course, take the 2-1 lead, and you're just thinking, yep, this is it. This is pretty much it for the U.S. I don't think they're going to come back from this, because Mexico, when they of course are able to retake the lead late in the game, and we've seen this before where Mexico retake the lead in the game, they're not going to let go of that lead. But then 2 minutes later, to everybody's surprise, the U.S. tied it up. And it's none other than Weston McKennie that scored from Gio Reyna. And I want to first mention that this was actually a gift that Mexico just gave to the U.S. in terms of that set-piece opportunity. And I believe it was Charlie Rodriguez that, I don't know what he was doing there. I don't know if he just kind of had a moment there, but he basically could have just easily cleared the ball away as the ball was coming toward near his feet, and I feel like maybe that ball kind of got caught into his feet, and he basically just gifted a corner to the U.S. And when I kind of saw that, I kind of had a feeling that, yeah, maybe the U.S. can actually score a goal, and maybe that was not only a big mistake that Charlie Rodriguez made, but that might be a mistake that's going to come back to haunt Mexico. And indeed it did, because this was the same corner that McKennie of course scored. And Weston McKennie, this is a classic example of what happened when you don't succeed. Try again. Twice in this game, McKennie was denied with his header. The first time was off the post, and then the second time was just an incredible save from Guillermo Ochoa. But this time he not only put power into that shot, but he also put it in a spot that even if Ochoa is able to react quickly, he wasn't even going to save that one. And yeah, the U.S. were all tied up at 2 apiece. Then in the 90th minute, Horvat would deny Lozano from long range, and even though I know on the board here you think it was just an easy save, it actually wasn't. I mean, that was a wonderful shot from Chucky Lozano, but Horvat with an incredible save to deny him. And then he would rob Romo as Luis Romo was going through on goal, but the flag, of course, went up at that point. So even if Romo scored that goal, it wouldn't have counted. But at that moment, I don't think even Horvat knew that the flag went up. In fact, I don't think even Luis Romo thought that the flag went up there. So either way, it was an incredible save from Horvat to deny Romo at that point. And then in the second minute, there was some tempers flare, and this is also what I talked about early, when the temperature was already starting to climb high in terms of both of these teams and in terms of their tempers, and this really kind of started to spark to a level where you're definitely going to see both teams going to get into each other's faces. And this all started when Herrera basically spiked Horvat as he come off his lines, and anytime when you decided that, you're basically asking for the opponent to really get into your face. And especially in this rivalry, when you did something dirty like that, yeah, there's definitely going to be a coming together. And then in the 6th minute, the game was actually, or the 6th minute of stoppage time, the game was actually stopped because the P-Champ basically rang out. And this is all part of CONCACAF and FIFA trying to create this new protocol and this anti-homophobic and discrimination protocol, where if there's some discrimination or homophobic chant that is basically ringing out from the crowd, they are going to immediately stop the game for a couple of minutes. And therefore, because of the P chant, which for a very long time FIFA has said that Mexican fans, they have to knock it off in terms of doing the P chant, because if you don't knock it off, we're going to do something like this. And indeed, this time CONCACAF decided to kind of stop the game. And in some way, the Mexican players, not only they were livid about the stoppage, but they were actually livid at the fans that basically shouted that chant, because up until that point, you can clearly see Mexico, they were definitely pressing to try to get the winning goal. They were definitely not settled to try to get this into extra time, and because of this stoppage, that basically just killed their momentum and basically forced this game into extra time. So we go to extra time, and in the first half of extra time, Yetland did go down with a cramp, but he did, of course, eventually stayed on. And I also kind of wrote, this game is going to start to become a battle of nutrition, because not only the fact that this has already been a very intense game and a very high pace kind of game, but not to mention the fact that both of these teams have only had a couple of day rest, and they're playing up in altitude in Denver. I just kind of had a feeling this is going to be a battle of nutrition, and you're going to definitely start to see some fatigue from both of these teams. And what's even more surprised after watching this is that neither of these teams, or not a lot of these players, were really kind of tired whatsoever. And I guess maybe this is just because of the fact that this game was just so intense, and the players was just so focused on getting that winning goal in extra time. It almost felt like it was just a moment where, even though your body basically tell you to stop, there's that adrenaline rush that basically kicked in, and it just feels like both of these teams and all these players just had that adrenaline rush. And even though you would think that they normally be very tired after such a high intense game like this, they just kind of kept going, almost like they had unlimited battery. Like, I swear, if this game would have continued for another 90 minutes, I won't be surprised if these players are not going to are still going to keep going at the same pace, because of that intensity and that adrenaline rush that has kicked into all these players. But then in the 94th minute, I thought Hector Herrera got very lucky to not get his second yellow card after he basically put on a rough challenge on Way, and even exposed his studs when making that challenge. Now, normally, if this game was not a final, and if this was in the regular season, then yeah, Hector Herrera clearly should have been sent off in this sequence. But because of the fact that this is a final, and because the game was that intense like that, I actually don't really had any problem with the referee deciding not to show a yellow card. And I know fans are not going to be happy, and I know a lot of U.S. fans were absolutely livid when the second yellow card was not shown. But again, when you have such a high intensity game like this, the last thing you need is to have a red card to basically potentially ruin what has already been just an incredible game that we've seen in this one. Now, in the 103rd minute, Linus did blaze it high from long range. I thought Mexico was really controlling the game in the first half and was really kind of pinning the U.S. back, but they didn't really had anything to show for other than Linus had that one half chance where he basically blazed it high from long range. So that is pretty much the end of the first half of extra time, which is now me bringing my travel board, and the clipper here just fell down onto the floor, but it's time for me to bring my travel board, because I basically ran out of room up to that point when I wrote the notes of this game, and now bring in the second half of extra time. And actually, you know what? I'm just gonna kind of hold this. I'm gonna be doing something similar to what I did a week ago when I reviewed the Sunday game, and I basically was just holding this boards and basically do the review while reading the book. But at least this time, I basically can just hold the board and basically look at the notes that happened in this game. So in the second half of extra time, in the 110th minute, there was a big moment where the referee had to go to VAR to see whether or not if Salcedo actually bring Pulisic down. And actually, originally, it looks like Pulisic was brought down by two Mexican player, and then later on, we found out it might have been Salcedo, the one that was the culprit in terms of bringing down Pulisic in the box. And when I look at this, I didn't think this was a penalty, because I think Salcedo did get the ball, and yes, he did kind of brought down Pulisic on the follow-up, but I didn't think it was kind of reckless in a way where I know sometimes when you got the ball, it doesn't mean that you can basically just recklessly bring a guy down the box and not commit a penalty. But in that sequence, I feel like that was just kind of clean, where not only Salcedo got the ball, but he kind of just brought down Pulisic on the follow-up, and normally I don't see that being called a penalty. But they did give a penalty there, and obviously the Mexican fans were not happy about that, and certainly Tata Martino was not happy about that either, as he actually got ejected from the game. And he wasn't actually got ejected from the game for not being very happy, but more like when the referee was looking the VAR monitor, Tata Martino basically go over them, kind of put his hands on the referee to tell him that, look, it's not a penalty. But the problem of doing that is that anytime when you decide to put a hand toward the referee, and especially during a moment when he's looking at the screen and you trying to put a hand and trying to kind of change their mind, that is a big no-no. And no surprise that he, of course, got a straight red for that. Fans, of course, also started to throw in trash on the field after that call was made, and this won't be the only time that this decided to throw trash on the field. Like, honestly, I know a couple of weeks ago, the NBA basically had a couple of sequence where trash was thrown from the stands and hit a couple of the players, and obviously the stadium have done a great job, or the arena has, of those instant, the arena has done a great job in terms of banning fans in terms of attending any future game. I'm really hoping that maybe this is going to be the same in terms of this, where CONCACAF and also the Empower Stadium staff can basically step in and maybe try to find those people that was throwing things onto the field and also throwing things to the players, because as we continue in the second half of extra time, there was a lot of trash that was thrown onto the field, and some of those trash even kind of caught some of the players when it was basically raining down onto the field. But as I mentioned, it was a penalty that was given to the U.S., and after a bit of a long delay to basically tell Tata Martino that he of course got sent off, because he was kind of in shock the fact that he got sent off for that. But after that, and also so just the security basically kind of fencing off the fans that was throwing the trash, Pulisic basically stepped up to take this penalty. And I actually thought that with such a long delay like this, I feel like this could be a big disadvantage for the US, and especially for Pulisic, because now he's going to have to think about this, and this is probably the most important penalty that the US have ever taken in quite some time. But fortunately for the US and fortunately for Pulisic, he basically made no mistake from the penalty spot, basically put that one in top bin, and the US were up 3-2 up to that point. And the US actually decided to go to a section that was a pro-Mexican section. By the way, if you want to know in terms of the ratio in terms of Mexican and US fans, yeah, this was kind of more like 70 to 30 Mexican fans, kind of similar to what happened in 2015 when that game was taking place at the Rose Bowl, and it was pretty much a pro-Mexican crowd. And obviously I know at the end of the day the US didn't have any say in terms of this game, but when I found out that this game was going to be taking place in Denver, and Denver is a city that's known to have a lot of Hispanic population and a lot of Mexican fans, and also pretty close to cities that has a very big Mexican population, you knew that it was going to be a pro-Mexican crowd. But yeah, the US was trying to go to that section, almost like it's like in your face kind of moment. But what the Mexican fans are going to do. They immediately decided to throw trash at them when the US was celebrating. One of the trash actually hit Gio Reyna, and he of course had to receive some treatment because of that. But yeah, the US were up 3-2 up to that game, and just as you thought that the drama has not, it's already a very dramatic game, and the drama probably would cool down after that, right? Well, in the 118th minute, and just after 4 minutes, when the U.S. scored that what looked like maybe the winning goal, VAR awarded a penalty for Mexico, and this apparently was a penalty award for Mexico because McKenzie basically handball in the box. Now, I did look at it a couple of times, and there were actually two angles that they keep showing, and one angle they kind of show that McKenzie, it does seem like the ball hits him, but his arm was kind of in a natural position. But then there was another angle where it was pretty clear that McKenzie basically handballed that one, and his arm was kind of in an outstretched position. And even though you have conflicted angle like that, it really only takes one good angle, where if there is a clear angle that showed that his hand was in an outstretched position and it handballed that one, then yeah, obviously that penalty was given. So yeah, therefore the penalty was awarded to Mexico, but again, it's a long delay because of the fact that trash was of course continuing to throw on the field. I think this time it's the U.S. fans that are throwing the trash, and also the U.S. player was trying to delay this penalty kick take as long as possible to really made Mexico and the penalty kick taker Gallardo kind of think about this penalty. And unlike how the how in the previous one where Mexico was trying to do the same strategy and didn't quite work out. This time, it actually worked out for the U.S. because, Gallardo basically stepped up from the spot, and Ethan Horvath denies him from the spot. And, it was definitely not a good penalty from Gallardo. I mean, he didn't really hit that one very well, but you got to give a lot of credit to Ethan Horvath. And I even kind of tweeted out after this penalty kick that he's saved, he has now become a legend of U.S. soccer. Like, it doesn't matter what he's going to do, or maybe this is his final game as a U.S. men's national team player. He is going to be live in the Hall of U.S. soccer as a player that made a crucial penalty kick stop to keep the U.S. in the lead and eventually won the game for the U.S. Now, in the 6th minute of stoppage time, there was pitch invader, basically kind of stopped the game a little bit because, just as if you think this game isn't crazy enough, let's add pitch invader into the action. There was more tempers flare after Gallardo basically fouled Pulisic, but then finally in the 131st minute of this game and in the 11 minutes of stoppage time, the final whistle was blown to put an end of probably the greatest Mexico versus US game ever in history. And honestly, I talk about the 2-0 moment, and that was back in the early 2000s, and why we always talk about that moment in the US soccer fan base, because it's just such a legendary kind of moment. I feel like this is going to be a game that 20 years down the line, not only the fact that we're going to talk about 2-0, but we're also going to be talking about this game of how this was a game that, the U.S. with perseverance and resilience able to come back from going down twice in this game and win 3-2 against Mexico. And again, as I also said earlier about how, the question is, can this U.S. side that is very inexperienced and still relatively young, can they actually show some resilience to really stand up to the powerhouse that is known as Mexico, and also with their experienced player? Well, after tonight, I think the answer is definitely yes. And I'm also hoping that, as much as that the answer, of course, is yes at that point, I'm hoping that's going to continue as we head to World Cup qualifying. I mean, as special as this moment is, and I know those U.S. players are going to soak up this moment for a while, we got to remember it's going to be about a month from this game where the U.S. are going to be in the Gold Cup, and then I think World Cup qualifying is going to also start very quickly. So, as great as this moment is and as historic as this moment is for the U.S., they got to also remember that there is more bigger task that is going to be up at that point. And, I think I kind of said this earlier, where if I would have taken in terms of the U.S. qualifier for the World Cup rather than winning this Nations League Final, I would definitely take them qualifying for the World Cup. I mean, it's nothing against the Nations League Final, and that, the U.S. always want to win some silverware, but at the end of the day, as important as this game was and as historic this game is, I'm really hope that the U.S. can really carry the momentum into this game, into the Gold Cup, and also into the World Cup qualifying, because I kind of feel like, remember back in 2017 when the U.S. won the Gold Cup and how everybody was celebrating that achievement, and the fact that they can, of course, carry that momentum into the World Cup qualifying, and look what happened in that 2017 campaign. And yeah, I just hope this is not going to be the same case in this World Cup qualifying campaign coming up. But this is a game that will definitely help their confidence, and just kind of shows that this young U.S. side, the future is bright for U.S. soccer, and that these players have definitely shown some resiliency that I don't think I've seen any U.S. soccer team has done for a very, very long time. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And again, I forgot about the stats in this game. Shots in this one, 14 shots compared to the 21 that Mexico has. Both teams had 7 shots on goal, 4 shots off target for the 8 that Mexico has, 3 shots that was blocked for the 6 that Mexico has. And possession-wise, 43% possession compared to 57% possession that Mexico had in this game. And yeah, again, hope you guys enjoyed this review. I know it's a relatively long review, but I want to, just like how incredible this game is, I just want to kind of talk about everything in this game, and that, again, this has got to be maybe the greatest game I've ever watched, which just pretty much everything happened in this game. And then something extra that you usually never see in a soccer game, and it still happened in this one too. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this game? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I, of course, will see you guys next time.